Okay, so we're back now with working with value, light, edges, and contrast. And now we're going to take on a cube here. So I've got a cube popped up in through here. So it's a white cube on a white background. And first thing you immediately notice is that the lightest value gets a little washed out with the background. So we're going to alter that and change that a little bit. I'll talk to you and show you why I'm doing that, and then I'll demonstrate how I do it. And so you can see that thinking behind it. And then we'll talk today about 1, 2, 3 step shading. When we look at a planed object, any kind of planar object like a pyramid or a rectangular cube or a cube, when seen from the side, you'll see generally three different planes, or top or bottom, and they'll all be a little bit different value. There'll be a lighter side, a medium side, and a darker side, which you can see here. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'll go ahead and lay in the general object in my composition here. So I've got working with a 2-point form, and I'm working with charcoal today again. So we'll lay in the box here. So just working on angles now of the 2-point box through here. Getting that laid in. Okay, and I'll come down. So I'm going to freehand it. I'm going to tighten it up and give it that machined kind of edge, man-made edge, if you will, in just a moment here once I get that laid in. Let me pull the camera out just a little bit. Make sure we get it all in. There we go. That's it. That's a little better. There we go. Okay, so laying in the form of the composition here of the box, simple 2-point box, diminishing to the left, diminishing now a little bit to the right here, coming down, and I'll lay in the shadows here. The shadow comes out and then over, kind of bisects the vertical line through here. It comes down, then back over and through that way. There we go. So we've got her laying in that way. And I'll go ahead and put in, it's hard to distinguish a little bit where that table is. I'm going to put it a little bit lower, about right here across the form, so we can get a little value contrast going between the background and foreground object. Then I'm going to take my forms, and since they're man-made, I'm just going to put some straight edges. I always keep my edge boundaries tight. Now I'm not really pushing down that hard. I'm not making it distinctively outlined. I'm just taking on a very crisp edge, since it is a crisp edge. And of course, this is a cast shadow, so that's going to get a crisper edge for now. But I freehanded it first, and I think it's important to keep it loose and fresh. But you can come back with your straight edge and tighten up those areas as per needed here, back through here, and then on over. And then we'll catch the background, just platform back there, a little backdrop there. There we go. Okay, so we've got our form laid in. Now let's analyze really quickly where the light source is coming from, so we can start to set that up. We know that it's not natural, so it's artificial. And the light source is coming from the top left. We can tell that by the direction of the shadow moving back right into space this way. And we see that the front plane, since it's light's a little bit lower, this receives the least amount of light. So in terms of 1, 2, 3 step shading, this is 0 or the lightest. This is 1. This is 2, medium, very, very light, almost the same here. Then it gets pretty dark here. So it's 1, 2, 3 step shading, and we'll just mop. And when we do our block in, we'll block in with the the cast shadow in this form, plain shadow, all the same value, as well as the background. So we've done our lay-in, linear lay-in. Let's start with our block-in of values, and I'll start that with a medium pencil. So I'm just going to lightly start to move over this box form with a value, just kind of glazing over in charcoal here. Very light, very loose. Just get a tonal play going on here. We'll be probably fairly close already with that, and we're gonna manipulate that a little bit, make it more reflective too as well, as we work with reflected light. So in the block-in stage, we're going to separate, and we're working with 1, 2, 3 step values. So I'm going to go a little darker here with my plane for this cube, this right plane box here. Block that in. And we're not going to stop here on the form shadow. The form shadow is on the box itself. It's the naturally occurring form, right? We're going to go ahead and capture, let's go ahead and capture that cast shadow too as well. Let's go ahead and block it in. So all really the same value. The only distincting difference is I've got a little linear quality there just to show where the form ends and the cast shadow begins right in through here, right? So we've got that. So we've got our 1, 2, 3 rudimentary steps on our cube. But look how quick that was. It didn't take long to get that change. That happened pretty immediately. Then I'm gonna take some pains here now to block in the background tone as well, so we can get a little tone back there. And I'll reach over and remember I'm using my triangle as a protective device from my hand. The great thing, again, I can see through it, and I've got my finger up a little bit underneath it so I can raise it, lay my hand over it, and just go to town drawing here. So we're going to lay in another value, and I'm going to make this value, since we're going to make our background darker than that which is in the photograph, I'll make it a step or two in value, a little darker. Just rough it in for now. Through here and through there. Get that roughed in, and we're going to make that table value a little darker later on. So I'll put just a little light through there, or value through there. There we go. Coming across here. So as they're working, you can see I'm pretty light and loose with my hatching marks, and I try to keep them relatively light pressured as I'm going through here. Now I could come back here and catch the edge, abut this edge with my triangled hard edge, so that when I run across here, if I don't want to run that in right now too heavily, that abuts that edge, keeps that nice and tight. We'll clean up that edge even further later on as we get more value in our drawing as we're building it up. Right now we're just blocking in it. We're trying to separate very quickly the value range, the value in light quality or situation that the composition is giving us in terms of our understanding of space. We're trying to put it all together here, and we'll block in this background tone. So it's about the same tone as the form shadow on the right side, and also the cast shadow too as well. And remember, you can turn your page around. I'll be doing that in a little bit to really get the best angle for your hand. And I'll come back here and I'll just quickly catch my edge. Later on I'm going to have to be really exact where I want. I've got a few different lines to catch, but we can really catch that later on. So go a little bit darker there. There we go. Okay, so we've got that blocked in. Now we've got a rudimentary 1, 2, 3 steps. Next step I want to take is I'm going to use my soft here, my soft charcoal pencil, is start to divide these planes up even further. Now, when we have these strong plane boundaries like we do, that's where a plane ends, right at 90 degrees, and then it turns, right? So turning here, turning across here, turning down to the floor. That's all good and well, and that's going to get a distinctive value change every time you have a planar object. And sometimes that's why I like to use the reference for boxes when I draw the figure for diagrams, is that it's not ambiguous. There's no ambiguity about where this changes. So if you have a rounded form, it may take a while to get across, and there could be some ambiguity. So the next stage I'm going to start to do is slow it down a little bit and start to render with the charcoal pencil and start to add core shadow. So the core shadow occurs in these boxier objects. It's subtle, but they occur generally at the edges of forms. So about right in through here where I'm making a stronger mark, I'm going to butt my edge so I can see how I run it across here. It's really easy. And if you look on the image that we're working from, it's a little darkest close to that edge, and then it fades out a little bit. So I can kind of set that up now, and as we get darker and darker, they can make it even more realized. What's happening is we're getting a little reflected light, especially more towards this bottom little lip edge and then into the middle. Okay, so we're getting reflected light coming down onto the surface and then back up on the object itself. So all of these transitions are awfully smooth, aren't they? They're very smooth transitions, so smooth edges inside the plane. So when you're working inside the plane with planar objects, you're going to have smoother transitions, and as you work, when a plane changes, you're going to get a dramatic shift in value, thus the 1, 2, 3 steps in the beginning, and of course ultimately you do wind up with a strong, stepped kind of image because the plane change is so dramatic. So keep that in mind. So it really makes it very manageable, I think, overall, because of the strong plane changes, to really see that. It's in the subtleties here of within the plane, that each particular plane, there's a subtle soft transition, even in the medium plane and in the lighter plane. They're not flat. They have movement. So light skips across forms, and anytime you want representation, you're going to have to smooth value, shading, if you will, across that form to show that it's not flat. So even if we have like a flat piece of colored paper of any color, dark, whatever, gray, it's still, you're going to draw that even representationally on a surface, you're going to have to give value ranges to it. Okay, that's important to know. All right, so we're moving along now. You can see I'm caressing the tip, the corner of this box here, and that's because now I want to keep the edge clean and clear. But notice I'm getting so incrementally a little darker, and I'm getting close, probably pretty close to where I want it to be. And we're going to start to fade it a little bit. Still darker here, you can see along the edge. It's subtle. Really look at it, and then later on get your own objects and set them up for your own studies from life, and then use my images too if you want, or anybody else's. They're not just exclusive to mine. These techniques are pretty common throughout art drawing training especially, so there's no particular individual genius that I've got going on here. So we've got the edge here. Now you can see where it gets a little reflective, so I'll bathe that, lighten that up, and it's really soft transition through here. So I lighten up, then I'll come back down. And I like what that's going on. I'm going to put just a little bit more dark right in here on this edge, and that's pretty close to where I want it. Now, as we come down to the cast shadow, so I'm going to catch this edge with my cast shadow here, okay? And I'm going to add some tone. You can tell where this cast shadow is darker, so I'm going to come out and catch kind of this edge over here already, where it meets the table, and then bring it back into the edge of the box, and it's darker. But there's a strong implied line there, not because there's a true line that somebody drew on the box, but because those values are distinctively different. It's this value here, right in through here on the cast shadow side, is about as dark as there. So they're pretty close as the core shadow. So working in the cast shadow comes up to the edge of the end of the box, which gets a crisper edge. Why? Because it is a boundary edge. So keep that in mind. Boundary edges need their integrity. They need to remain a crisp edge. So we'll go darker here. I'm not going blasting it completely dark in the cast shadow. We want to be able to see on the table if a little object was hidden on there. So we have now an edge in through here, crispening that up, darkening, and you can see immediately it starts to get lighter out here. And so we'll come out, in through here, and out here. We'll catch that back in a moment. Now we'll have light, reflected light, or the direct light source coming out through here, bouncing back up, and then reflected light coming back onto the object softens this up and lightens this up. So it ends, the darkest part ends, this kind of line, this secondary sort of slightly harder edge. You get just a little bit of edge. That's a reflective surface on the table. And it tells you where the cube ends in light. Then it gets a little softer and mottled in through there. So we can work through here to the tip. And then right along this edge, I'll crispen this up with my pencil tip, just glazing over it. And we can go just a little bit darker down in through here. I'm going to leave this reflected light a little lighter than I see it, because I want to make an issue of you seeing it. And so I'm also trying to communicate to you that the value ranges that you see on images and objects in drawing, when you draw them, can be changed and altered sometimes significantly, as per needed and or warranted, right, when you make a drawing. So you don't have to necessarily keep what you have. You can alter it. I think that is something that is important to denote pretty quickly when you draw, is that you're drawing what you know and what you see can be closely related, but they're not always the same. So taking what I know now and applying it a little bit to what I see and altering for the effect, keeping this just a little bit lighter and fresher, so we see that pop out a little bit. All right, so that's working pretty well. I may come over here and take my edge and just kind of glisten this off a little bit, make it a little bit sharper edge. I'm taking my kneaded eraser. You could use your white eraser too, right in through there. It takes that off and through there pretty good. Keeps that a little crisper for now. And we can take that off for now too. There we go. Okay. So we're setting up pretty nicely. So again, we've got that 1, 2, 3-step shading situation going. I'm going to take a moment here and let you keep drawing. I'm going to sharpen my medium a little bit so you can tell where it's starting to get. It's a good teaching point where it's starting to get close to the end of the wood. So I'm going to shave this off a little bit, so I'll have a little bit extra now to work with. It makes it easier for turning the pencil to the side. I think that's really helpful. So you should be blocking in now values, moving from the lay-in to the block-in, separating your 3 distinct planes, 1, 2, 3-step shading. And our job now is we're going to add a little bit of tone to the background. We're going to make it darker than what we see. Okay, kind of like the sphere. If you saw the sphere, this is the second in multiple series image now on drawing light and using value, edges, and contrasts to kind of start to put it all together. We still have to talk about composition and texture. Okay. All right, so I'm finishing up a little sharpening here. This is pretty nice. Now some artists like it really long. I don't, because I draw a little heavy and I break these off. So everybody has a little bit different process, but you certainly want to have it sharpened enough that you're not drawing with just your knuckle of your like drawing with your knuckles of your hand. I see students do that sometimes. It's kind of hard for them to draw because the pencil tip is not sharp. Okay, so I'm going to move on here. We're going to darken in the background a little bit. Now, I know right in through here is going to be my greatest degree of contrast, more so than over here. So I'm going to make this side a little darker than this side, and I'm going to turn it upside down now. So if you want to move that to me, you can do that with me. That way I can get to it a little bit better. So if it's a little strange in the camera, I understand, but there's a reason why for it, so we can really get to it. So I'm going to start in through here. Notice I'm going in a little bit different direction with my stroking than the first layer I put down. That blends it together a little bit with the tool. See if you can make your drawings without blending with your fingers. My students have to. You out there in YouTube land, I can't reach out there and make you. See if you can do that, and then later on I will introduce stumps and I'll talk about finger blending and then drawing back on finger blending. There's a reason why we just don't use blending for the most part. It looks a little amateurish, and that's not meant to as a slight. But if you study the history of drawing, the idea of blending with the finger or the stump and then drawing back with the stroking, mark making, and then blending, and it has a way of integrating both together that makes an aesthetically really pleasing look. That's a pretty time-honored tradition. Now, rules are meant to be broken, but I think in the beginning we want to stick with the rules, and then later on I say break them if you need to. So notice I'm making this a little darker now in through here, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to keep this area of the cube a little. I'm going darker, of course, but I'm not going to go too much darker than this right now. I'm going to keep it about here. So we're not going to go quite as dark as maybe the sphere, since we have a lighter background, but I do want to make it darker. And the reason why, I want to show off these planes a little more, especially this one against the floor, because in the image that we have, it's so washed out a little bit. It's such a matte finish that you don't necessarily get much of a highlight on that particular object. So that's working pretty well. I'm going to come over here and give a little value to the back of on the table here. Okay, notice the value range. If we took a big circle here, see where my pencil is, what would these values be? 7s, 8s, 9s, 7s, 6 maybe, 9s, 8s, 7s, 6s, 5s, 3s, maybe 4 5s in through here. Setting up little degrees of contrast and edges. So it's like a little abstract drawing, if you will, for now. All right, so I'm going to flip this back over to where we had it in the beginning in front here. So we're laying down our cube pretty nicely. So it's going pretty well. And what we notice is we start to get some nice realism through here. So I'm going to work my cast shadow a little bit further. This edge where I'm working with my pencil now, I'm going to leave it a little bit softer than this edge. It's still crisper than what's going on inside, but not as crisp at the boundary edge and not as crisp as the cast shadow. And that's because it's a little bit further away. So we're going to soften this. I'm going to soften this a little bit. And through here, and then we'll darken just a little bit of what we see. Tends to be a little bit of a halo right in through here, so we'll try to get that. Then it gets a little bit darker right in through here. There we go. And we'll come across over here. And that's looking pretty good. Okay, so a little softer edge in through here. A little soft, slightly softer, not quite as soft as that one. And then more crisp, especially as we get down closest to the object, down in this range, and then closest to the edge. The closest here it stays really pretty crisp, almost as tight as the boundary, and then it fades off a little bit, so you can soften this. And how I soften this is I just kind of run glaze over it and just kind of blur this just a little bit. That gives that little softer edge. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to add some value now into the table a little bit. So that's going to help me pop out this plane over here on the box. So I'm going to lay down a little value over here. It's about a 2 probably on the value scale, 1.5 or 2. And make this a little darker back in through here. So that's going to give me ultimately some way to contrast this front plane. Because in our image, our photograph, it's about the same value. So we want to adjust that. So we're going to adjust it down a little bit. You have the right as an artist to adjust that more so than maybe what you've known so far. Okay, so we'll have that. We'll come through here a little bit, and we'll put down some little tone here. Take off such a contrasting bite through here. And I'm using a soft pencil. If you're not confident enough with your touch, these can kind of run away. I'm barely stroking it on the surface of the paper. Okay, I'm letting some of the marks. That's fine. You're sketching through. Doesn't have to be. We're not making these photoreal. We're making good realized diagrams and sketches and practice. Practice is often. The more you do this with your own structural sketching, the quicker you get and better at it. Don't let it be mundane and boring. Find a way to make it exciting for you, and you'll grow as an artist exponentially. You really kind of take off with this kind of idea. So I'm going to tighten this line up, straighten it up a little bit, catch my edge, reorient my edge a little bit there. Always got to continue to judge your edges. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to jump now to the middle plane. Let me lean this over just a little bit to catch it, because I want to show you now that the lightest area of the box is kind of in the middle, and shadow tends to congregate on the lip a little bit. That's because the plane break optically from lighter to medium value or light medium value is greatest, and it gets a little reflective, and then it jumps back to slightly darker along the edge of the box. And I think I'm going to turn it even further, maybe this way, so I can work it. And to show you, so I'm going to come across this lip now of the box really lightly, and I've got a soft pencil working it. Working through, then I'm going to lighten up a little in the middle. And then I'm going to get a little darker in the edge, back to the edge, all the edges really, so that the middle kind of has an opening just slight, perceptually very, very slight, where it gets just a little lighter. Not by a whole lot, but enough to make a difference that we want to talk about just a little bit into there. There we go. So generally I make that front edge a little darker, so I'm going to turn it upside down a little bit, or a whole lot of bit, about that, and we'll come over. Catch this, soften it, so I can work in different directions and smooth this. Work that lip a little bit. See how I work through the background and just bring it into the foreground, very lightly, very loosely, in through here. Maybe work diagonally, work in different directions, just to get a smoother. It's a pretty smooth surface for, you know, drawing a piece of just regular sketch drawing paper. To work like this, you can still get it fairly smooth, even though it's granular. I mean, we could blend this thing to death and make it ultra smooth. That's not the point. The point is to continue to make it a drawing. So we're working well in through here. So I think that's coming along pretty nicely. I'm going to darken this edge just a little bit, taking great pains to keep my edge tight. Notice now I'm not drawing down here. I can't, it's hard to feather the value when I'm here on a point, so I'm way out here with my hand. I think that's important to denote. And coming through here. There we go. I'm going to catch this edge a little bit, lay my little edge on there, my budding edge. Take that off a little bit, so keep that crisp. Okay, I think we're just about there. I might darken up this edge, right in through here. So you can see I've left the opening in the middle just a little bit lighter, and I'm a little darker on the edge. We're talking about, you know, a third of a step or half a step. Now I'm going to come back with my background, and I'm going to really plot the edges of my box. Draw a line. Get an extra crisp line in there, so I can come now with my final, probably my final pass with my background value, and go a step darker. I don't want to kill it too dark this time. You could. We're setting up more degrees of contrast over here, all right? Right in through here, along that edge. Keep that edge crisp. As we're working. There we go. Now continue to bring this dark over, but now I'm going to lighten up the value just a little bit. And so as I come across here, right in through here, We'll make it just a little bit darker. So I want to catch this edge, my final edge, here and here. So I've got slightly two different edges, and I want to catch the one I want right into there. And of course, that takes into account perspective. You know how I feel about and think about perspective, how important it is for all artists, no matter what range of work you're doing, conceptual or highly traditional or 19th century realism. We open our eyes and we use perspective, so we might as well study how we see. And so I'm bringing this dark over just a little bit more. It's not quite as dark here, and I might go just a little, put a little extra glaze into here. I call it glazing. It's just a layered, very light layered passage. It's kind of a connection to painting there. So we've got that going on, and then one more little pass over here. I think that'll be, that looks like it's looking pretty good. Maybe just slightly darker along that edge. Again, in these planes, their boundaries are hard edges, right? But inside, they're soft transitions, right? Boundary, boom, boundary, soft transitions. Even though they're greater degrees of darkness, their contrast is not great. This is probably the greatest degree of contrast right there on the value changes within each one of these planes. So within the planes, there's not a great degree of change. It's within the boundary break, if you will, from one edge, boom, to another, etc., and you get a good degree of change. Okay, so we have a couple things left. We have the final plane of our box, and so it is the front plane here. I'm going to let you catch up if you need. I'm going to kind of shave off a little bit more of my soft. I really like to use a soft just about for everything, from my lay-in to my block-in to resolution. I understand if you're just beginning, it is difficult to control charcoal, and it is also very difficult to control softer charcoal pencils. I would suggest doing your, and I do that when I demonstrated just earlier, is I'll use a hard and medium, and you could probably get most of what you wanted to out of that. I just find that I don't have to push down and work as hard when I use a soft and an extra soft. But I was a student one time, a long time ago, and I certainly realized that, you know, goodness, it certainly is not easy to control by large part. Okay, all sharpened up now and ready for our pass here with the final plane, or lighter plane. So what was true of the first two planes, or plane number 2, plane number 3, is true of plane number 1. Light value shifts and transitions within that. So I'm going to come over and move it over a little bit so I can get to it better. That's just easier for me to do. If you want to keep yours straight, I think you should do that. I'm going to come over here and grab this edge a little bit where it meets plane 1 meets the medium plane, or light plane to medium plane, and darken this edge in just a little bit. Keep it crisp. Right in through there. There we go. Okay, so another thing I'm going to do here with this plane, I'm actually going to help show you to resolve a highlight a little bit. So it's, again, we're going to be a little bit darker along the edges where they move from the lightest plane into the boundary of the next planes of the table, and then a little bit lighter here on the center part. And I might even put a little bit of a highlight there too, but just perceptually very, very, very soft. Okay, so I'm going to catch this edge and I'm going to butt it, and then I'm going to come over. I've got my medium charcoal pencil, and I'm going to lay it in through here. Just perceptually a little bit darker at the edge. So see how I run my value with the pencil I'm drawing with into the next edge? It just makes it easy, because this is already darker. You can't tell. It's not going to get really much darker the way I'm drawing it with a light touch, and I'll run it into each edge. It's easy to do that. It keeps a nice, simple, smooth transition. If you paint, you might not be able to do that unless the paint is already dry, and it still might not be what you want, because they might blend over. So it's a little bit different in painting that way. All right, so we're moving through. So we're just kind of glazing across the surface of this because it's pretty, in the image, it's pretty flat. It's about a number 1 value. There's no real highlights in this drawing. Maybe along the lip of the top edge, maybe right in through here, just a little bit lighter, but it's not absolute light. So I'm going to put this tone down and in, and it's about a 1 on the value scale, or half of 1, 0.5. It's about 1. And I'm going to come across now the other way and glaze over it one more time, a little bit different direction. To kind of, when you go in different directions, they blend nicely a little bit. But we're talking about an ultra light touch. This is probably going to be a little difficult. If you're just starting out to get this touched, take great pains to be patient. Take great pains to do a lot of them in practice. I've done gazillions over the years as a student, and then as a professor, instructor. I do these all the time with students. Now it's good to have it on video so we can have it there for anybody. Catch that edge a little bit. Now I'm at the point now where I want to say, okay, I want to catch the boundary close to the plane edge is just a touch darker, just a little bit of a half step, just a little bit darker. Protect my arm from myself, or my hand from myself. You don't want to ruin your great work by the kind of smudging you don't want. Later on, smudging can be good for effect, but right now it's not our friend. So a little bit darker along that edge. Just a little bit darker. And I'm keeping the middle part of my box a little bit lighter. Just a touch stronger here on the edge. Down in through here. And in the actual image, there's reflected light coming off this one plane back down on the ground. And it makes right where they meet a little lighter. It's like a glow. I'm going to take that off. I don't want that because it's hard for me to see a crisper boundary. So I'm going to make that just a little darker. So that's a little difference that I'll make there. And I'll take this mark down a little bit. It's a little heavy. Take that off. Leave it as a sketch. Can't really tell much if I did anything. Oh well. So we're going to make the table just a little darker into here, and I'll make this plane a little darker. So they're pretty close to one another. And I'm going to make the table right into here. It's just slightly darker, even more so to just give you distinctive. Now you get a distinctive difference. And we're going to keep coming around with that plane. And through here on the edge, just a little more. Because we're getting close here. Getting close to finishing it up. There we go. Like so. I'll bring this down so you can see a little better. There we go. So I've got a little bit lighter in the middle, but not by much. And that's the way I want. I'm going to darken this edge just a little bit more. And we're pretty good. Let's take a look at it. So it's working pretty well. We start to get a nice light situation going on. So you can see the contrasting difference between here and here is pretty subtle. I'm going to darken this plane down just a little bit. The top plane number 2, it's a little too light for the range that we're going with, but just a touch. I'm just going to glaze over it and calm it down. Take the light down off of it just a little bit, not a whole lot. about right there. It calms that down. Keep the back edge a little darker, the front edge a little darker, and just calm it down just a little bit. I think that calms it down enough to get the feeling that we want. Now, I'm going to make the table over here just a touch darker on this side, working from the background forward. So background here. I'm going to go a step now darker so we can contrast against this cube just a little bit and through here. There we go, you can see that. Okay, that's good. It's not good if you can't see it. Keep it in the camera, sometimes I forget. There we go. Coming down here and blending this with my tool just a little bit. Kind of let it just flourish out. Keep it light and through there. All right, so let's take a look here. Okay, so we're working pretty well. I think we've got pretty much a good light situation going, I think, throughout. And the only thing I might do is if I want a little highlight into here, the light source would be coming down at 45, hitting here for a highlight. Remember, highlights are always at 45 degrees, and they depend on the surface of what you're drawing. If it's very glossy, if it's got a glossy paint to it, like in the case of the white cube, it's going to be more distinctive. If it's really matte, like I have, these objects are plasticky, they're kind of a rubbery plastic, they're not going to be as obvious. So I'm going to make a little bit of an more highlight right kind of in through here. So I'm just going to take my Newton eraser and I'm just dabbing really slowly, and I've got just going to make a stamp out of it, and I'm just kind of rummaging around in through here and taking off a little. Taking great pains to make sure that the edge around it of the highlight is pretty soft in this case, since it's not a glassy form. And I'll probably go back and draw in it a little bit and around it to soften that back up just a little bit even further. Now be careful, don't glide across and scratch out. That tends to smudge charcoal and also graphite too as well. And just dab at it, keep that nice and dab. So now we have kind of an opening there for a highlight, and I'm going to take my medium charcoal pencil once I find it. There it is. And I'm going to soften that edge, and I might just tweak our image a little further, and I think we're just about done. So reasoning behind this now is to soften this little halo just a touch perceptually if I can, and we can get it to not look like it's a hole in there, but it's just a slight little highlight. So it's just perceptually just a little lighter. And also to do that, I could darken in this plane a little further, right in through here. That will help to pop that out, make that a little more of a highlight. That's pretty close. Right in through there, I could transition this off a little bit, and just becomes in and out, just a little tweaking, but I think we're just about there. What else would I do? I might darken this plane a little bit. So notice we've kept our edges really crisp with our plane breaks and boundaries. I might come over here and darken this little transition a little further, right in through here. There we go. Okay. Darken a little bit more on the table, just touch. And I think I might go one more pass right in through this area. Let me set it up straight, because I can get to it, I think, pretty well. There we go. Oriented back in the camera, and I'll take my soft pencil and right in through here. This is the greatest degree of contrast. This relationship is the focal point. The cube is, but right in through here even so. And I might come back and say one little extra glazing touch of value, just slightly darker right in through this area. And we're talking just a little bit, not talking a whole lot. There we go. That right in through there, and that's starting to do what I want through here. And start to take off. And you notice the table edges are crisp, but they're not super sharp crisp. I let them, we don't even see them in the image, so I added that in there to make it a little stronger, but I didn't want them as sharp as our boundary edges. Our boundary edges of our box we want pretty crisp, especially in the front, more so even. And I'll just darken this in right in through here just a little bit, just to bring that over. And I think we're good, folks. So there you go. So we did a lay-in of a 2-point cube, and we blocked in our values to a 1, 2, 3 step shading arrangement, right? Then we started to refine using coarse shadows, cast shadows, and we worked the soft, subtle transitions within the planes. We made great pains to keep the planes hard boundary edges intact, right? So hard edge, soft transitions, hard edge, plane change, direction, soft transitions, hard edge. And then we refined and refined, and then we allowed ourselves to alter a little bit of the communication of the cube and what was going on in the image. We darkened in the background a little bit, in the foreground a little, and we probably darkened in both these planes a little bit, and so I could give a little bit of highlight here. I think that makes it a little bit more interesting image than what the actual image was giving us to as well. Okay, so there you go. So the next step now is to just practice the daylights out of it all the time, best you can when you have time, and for those certainly in YouTube land. And then also we're going to move on now to a cylinder, and I'll show you how that's very similar to the sphere. So the cylinder and the pyramid, their antecedents are the cube and the sphere. So let's move on now to, in our next video, the cylinder. All right, see you then. Bye-bye.